Hello, everyone, and welcome to our pre-recorded webinar. My name's Catherine, and today I'm going to be talking about tips for managing adult ADHD. We're super fortunate here at CanLearn that this webinar is completely funded by the Alberta government. We've been placing a number of webinars each month on different topics to help support individuals and families who have been impacted by COVID-19. Our hope is to bring awareness on important topics, discuss resources, and also hear from the community about different things that have worked for you and your families. We hope to put all of this together to create a community where we can support one another through these challenging times. A quick outline on today's presentation. We'll talk a little bit about who we are and the different things that we do at CanLearn. Our main focus today is on adult ADHD, so we'll talk a little bit about what is ADHD and debunking some common myths. We'll discuss a little bit about some important pillars needed for ADHD treatment, and our main focus is going to be on tips and tricks for managing ADHD, and we'll provide a couple of resources at the very end of this PowerPoint as well. A little bit about myself. My name is Catherine, and I'm a provisional psychologist at CanLearn Society, which means I'm a psychologist in training. Everything I do is under a supervised registered psychologist, and I'm currently collecting my hours. I've been working at CanLearn Society for almost 5 years now, and my main focus has been on social emotional learning, and through that I've interacted with quite a few families and quite a few adults as well as children who've been diagnosed with ADHD. So this is an area I'm super passionate and excited to talk to you about. For those of you who are new or not so familiar with CanLearn Society, let me tell you a little bit about ourselves. We do a number of different things. We have a psychologist at the office, we have pediatricians, we also have a number of trained facilitators who focus on different areas. We have some who focus on ADHD coaching, adult literacy, some who also work with children as well as families. One of the great things about CanLearn Society is many of our programs are funded, which means that they can be accessed by families who might not be able to afford these services. In addition to our webinars, we have support groups on supporting a community, having engaging conversations on each of our topics for the month. So have a look at our website if you're interested in receiving a little bit more support or having more of an in-depth conversation on today's topic, and this is something you would like to register for. All right, so let's dive right on in. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, ADHD. And when we actually put this up on our website, it seems to be the one that had the highest demand or the most interest. So let's start by defining what is ADHD. ADHD, you can think of it as a brain difference or a neurodivergent brain. That's kind of a fancy way of saying it. But it's someone who has difficulty with attention, concentration, impulsivity, self-control, and even self-esteem. Now, it's really important that when we talk about ADHD, we don't focus or we don't kind of have our eyes narrowed down on the inability to focus. That's a common thing that people think of. Oh, you just can't focus, you just can't pay attention. That's not quite what ADHD is. Individuals with ADHD have moments where they can really focus if it's something that's of interest to them or it's something that's new or challenging. And sometimes they can even hyper-focus as well. So when we think of ADHD, we think of as the ability to be able to regulate our focus in an even way across the majority of situations. I love using this example of receptionist, and this really stuck with me. So having ADHD is like being a CEO of a big company, and you have a receptionist who's in charge of all your meetings and letting people in and out of your office. Now, typically, you would expect the receptionist to understand which meetings are important and let them in, as well as put aside individuals who might not be a priority. When it comes to individuals with ADHD, the receptionist does all or nothing, which means they either let everyone in your office at once, and it's hard to focus because you have 20 different people talking to you, or they just decide not to let anybody in your office at all. So things like even sleep or food or going to the bathroom get completely forgotten because your receptionist just decides that today's not the day that they're going to go in. And that's a really good example of ADHD, that sometimes we can hyper focus on something where we forget to eat and sleep, and other times there's 100 different things in our head and it's hard to know on what is important. So when we think of ADHD, we think of different symptoms, and it's important to understand these symptoms are on a spectrum, which means everyone at a certain point in time deals with attention trouble. Everyone has days where they might misplace a belonging, they might have a hard time focusing, or they might easily forget something. That's typical and healthy and part of our natural human nature. However, when it comes to individuals with ADHD, what makes them different is the frequency of these happening. So how frequent we're misplacing belongings, or forgetting important appointments, or losing track of time, or saying things that we regret. And how is this impacting our everyday life? So is this impacting my relationships, where my friends are always mad at me because I'm late, or my partner is struggling because I always forget important things? Is this impacting my work, where sometimes I might shift or come in late as well? Or is this impacting my school? So when we look at these symptoms, remember, they're normal. Everyone has them to a certain point, but we want to look at the frequency and how it's impacting our everyday life. So a couple of common ones: having trouble with time and time management. So always feeling you're running late, you're rushing, no matter how hard you try to be on time. It always feels like you're the late one in your friend group and in your family. Sometimes you don't even realize how long time has passed, so you think it's only been 5 minutes, but it's been 2 hours. You have a hard time with organization. That's a really big challenge, whether it's organizing your room or even organizing materials for school or staying organized in work and in your task. Trouble with problem solving can also be a big one because there's so much going on with your brain, and sometimes it feels like, sitting down and trying to focus on something feels really hard. All of a sudden you're like, oh yes, I have to send an email. Okay, let me send an email and then I'll do this. And then you send an email and then you're looking out the window and you realize, oh, I haven't cut the grass in a while. Let me go cut the grass. And it's kind of trouble to follow through with things. Having challenges with self-motivation, so starting task is really, really hard. I kind of like to think of ADHD as all or nothing. So either, I just don't feel like it, I don't want to do it, and you kind of just feel super low. And then there's days where it's like, I want to do everything. So I'm going to clean the entire house, and I'm going to order groceries, and I'm going to buy new furniture, and it just all happens at once. Impulsivity is another one that can be a struggle with as well. So having a hard time controlling emotions, controlling what you say when you get frustrated. Even impulsivity can be seen in things like speeding or impulse buying as well. And it's always quite common too that there is trouble with emotional management and regulation. Now, something that's important to note is there are different types of ADHD. There's 3 common types. So we have hyperactive, which is, if you typically think of the really active boy touching everything, fidgeting everything, running on his bike nonstop, falling over because he was speeding but didn't realize it. There's the inattentive, which is, you can think of it as more individuals who have a hard time focusing because maybe they're daydreaming, they often are forgetful of things. And there's also the combined. So you can have either one or the other, or they can be combined as well. Some really common myths that I've heard. And as sad as it is, it's important for us to talk about this and debunk it. I grew up with a family who immigrated to Canada, and as I discussed with other families who were children of immigrants or who grew up in third world countries, mental health wasn't something really talked about. ADHD was definitely something we didn't talk about, and there was a lot of kind of cover up. Well, boys will be boys, or that's not a real thing. So it's important to bring awareness and to discuss this and to talk about it. So the first one is ADHD is not a real disorder. There are numerous research studies that have shown that individuals with ADHD, their brain functions very differently than the neurotypical individual. There's research that have shown how, their differences impact everyday life. And this has been something that's been numerously researched and studied. The other common one is ADHD is just a childhood disorder, so you'll grow out of it. It's only kids who deal with it. And this is quite false. This is something that we know presents from a young age all the way into adulthood. And sometimes those symptoms might look a little bit different. So maybe when you were younger, it was more the hyperactivity, and now it's kind of shifted more to inattentive. But there are still very real struggles that adults deal with who have ADHD. It's not something that you naturally grow out of. You might learn some strategies to help manage that, but it's not something that you just magically grow out of. ADHD is mainly a school problem, which means it's only from 8 to 5. After school, we're totally fine. And again, that's a false myth. A lot of individuals with ADHD, it's a 24-hour disorder, which means and a lot of individuals have trouble sleeping. Their brain's kind of always on. They have difficulties with friendships and social interactions. It's not just something that impacts school, it's all around. And then people with ADHD are lazy. This is one that really touches my heart, and it's important for us to talk about. A lot of times we don't see ADHD. It's not like you can get a blood test and all of a sudden say, oh, you have ADHD. And yet these individual struggles are very real. It's almost like saying a person with glasses, well, you should just try harder. You should try harder to see the board. And well, no matter how hard I try, my vision's not 20/20. I need my glasses to support that. It's the same with individuals with ADHD, telling them that they're just lazy or they don't want to do it. That really doesn't change the fact that they physically, their brain kind of blocks them from doing things. They need the support. They need the strategies. Some individuals need medication. And it's important to realize that if you are someone who has ADHD, you probably grew up your whole life thinking that maybe you're lazy or maybe you're not trying hard enough, or that's such a hard thing to grow up with. And I'm here to tell you this has nothing to do with your laziness or not wanting you to try. This has everything to do with individuals around understanding and you understanding yourself and what strategies work for you. So a couple of important facts when it comes to ADHD. Number one, there is no single cause for ADHD. It's not that your mother ate something or your father did something. There's lots of variables to consider for ADHD. And a common variable that we've seen is actually genetics. 80% is inherited. Funny enough, a lot of adults now are coming in for assessments because their children or their nephew or their niece all of a sudden got diagnosed with ADHD, and they go, yeah, I was really similar as a kid, and things starting to click. And that's how actually a lot of adults are finding out that they fit criteria for ADHD or they're presenting with these symptoms, is because they've noticed it in their younger children or nieces or nephew. It's found in approximately 12% of children, and it's more often diagnosed in boys than girls. A lot of times girls present very differently. With ADHD, it's not always that kind of hyperactive in your face. A lot of them kind of struggle. They feel like they might not fit socially, or they're a bit socially awkward, and they struggle with that inattention. So it is quite different compared to boys, and sometimes a lot of girls with ADHD might be missed when it comes to diagnosing. When it comes to ADHD treatment, research has shown that taking a multidisciplinary approach or a holistic approach is the best way to help for treatment with ADHD. So we look at and can learn these 4 supporting foundational pillars when it comes to ADHD. Number 1 is psychoeducation, which means learning about ADHD, building awareness on what it is and what it isn't, building awareness on your own symptoms, your own triggers, and understanding yourself or understanding a loved one who might have been diagnosed with ADHD. There's so many myths out there, and this isn't something that we've typically talked about until recently. So it's important to educate ourselves, whether it's through reading books, attending webinars, going on websites. It's important to understand what ADHD is and how it impacts different part of our lives. In order to support that, we also want to make sure we're managing a healthy lifestyle. So things like sleep, eating, having a number of different physical activities, those are all critical and important when it comes to managing ADHD symptoms and just overall mental health, right? We know that those are the foundations. If you haven't slept well, if you haven't eaten well, you don't always feel your best. And it's the same. ADHD sometimes might be harder to manage when we don't have our foundations in check. The next one is strategies. So on top of having that healthy lifestyle, educating yourselves, you want to understand different strategies. What works for you, what works for your body, but also understanding how sometimes a strategy might not work right away or it takes time to build. So some common important strategies for ADHD, when you think of them generally, they often involve breaking a task down, taking it step by step, and being able to have a visual. These are all things that kind of help support. And as we go in more specific things, when we talk about our tips and tricks, I'll talk about examples on how to use these. The last one, which is a little bit of a taboo topic, is medication. Individuals sometimes do need medication, whether it's for mental health or for treating and managing ADHD. This isn't something that we should feel ashamed about. This is something that is important, just like individuals who wear glasses to help with their sight. Some individuals need a little bit of help through medication. This is definitely something you want to talk about with a physician if this is something that you're interested in, and just understand that it is a bit of a trial and error at the beginning to understand what works best for you. We can never predict how medication is going to react with your body and the side effects that you're going to have. Some individuals find it right away on their first trial, and others, they need a bit of tweaking. So do I need to go for a lower dose, or maybe you need to try a different medication? And this is definitely an important conversation to have with your physician if this is something that you would like to know a little bit more information about. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. I know this is what you've been waiting for. Let's talk about our tips and tricks. Let's start off with organization. This is something that is definitely hard to manage for any individual, but especially those with ADHD. We know that when things are organized, they're cleaner, they're tidier, we just feel better, it's easier, we're more productive around, but it can be really hard to get to that state. So when it comes to things like your office or your desk or your house, and you're feeling like things are always chaotic and super messy, and you're not really too sure how to address it, here's a couple of tips. Number one, understand you don't need to get rid of all the clutter. Some clutter is okay, it's manageable, and it's something that you might use frequently. So having a blanket next to the couch because you're always cold, or when you're reading you like to have that, that's not necessarily bad clutter. But sometimes clutter can get out of hand where it might not have a purpose and it's just been sitting there for a while, and that's the clutter that we want to address. So the first question we want to ask is, does this have a place? And if the answer is yes, well, is there a reason why it's not there? So if, for example, you realize that your mugs are always all around your desk all the time, and you know the place for it to be is down in the kitchen, but for some reason they're always up on your desk. What's the reason behind that? Well, number one, I frequently drink my coffee around my desk, so they're often there. But number two, I always forget to bring them down. So do I need something to kind of help support me to bring me back to there? Some individuals place a tray right next to their desk of items that need to go downstairs after they're done, and that is something that they do. So once that tray kind of gets full, or once they notice it, they're like, oh yeah, this needs to go downstairs, instead of having things scattered all around. Sometimes an item might not have a place, and that's where you have to realize, well, why is this here? Is it just because I placed it and forgot it? Or is it something that I regularly use? And is this something that I need in my house? Or can I let it go? I really love this YouTuber called How to ADHD. She has had ADHD since she was 12, or sorry, she was diagnosed with ADHD she was 12. And she's been creating these amazing videos on things that have kind of helped her. And one of the things she talks about is clutter and organization. And she actually created this amazing worksheet to help individuals with ADHD understand what is the purpose of their clutter, or to understand their needs. Every individual is different. And for some individuals, they might not mind having kind of books on the table or blankets on the couch because it kind of feels a little bit homey and they're okay with that. But they feel really uncomfortable having cups all over the house, or having unwashed plates all over. So it's important to understand your needs, and that's how you're able to manage it. So this could be a good worksheet for you to understand your need and the different clutter categories around your house, whether they're there for a purpose or not, and how we can manage it. When it comes to actually thinking where I should put an item, a couple of things to consider. Number one, the point of usage. Place items where you're most likely to use them. Have your keys right next to the door or the garage, because that's where you place them. That's easily where you use them. Having, for example, if you have a pet, having the dog food in an area where you spend most of the time with your pet. Is it downstairs? Is it in the kitchen? Is it upstairs? It's important to place our items not where we think it makes the most sense at the time, but where we actually use it the most. Sometimes individuals really struggle with chargers, and they end up putting a couple of chargers in different areas of where they most use it. So one in the office, one in the bedroom, and one downstairs. So have them in places where you're actually going to use it. Number two, have them visible and in your line of sight. The moment we put something in a box, we completely forget it. And it's important for us to be able to see the different items around. So clear containers are huge things. Having labels are huge things. But if there's something that's definitely important that you don't want to miss or you want to lose, have it in a line of sight. Also, group similar things together. You don't want to be running around all over to try to find your jewelry or your pens. Have one kind of designated spot and put all the similar things. So pens, paper clips, staplers, those should all kind of be within together. Now, sometimes people think, okay, I'm going to get super organized. I'm going to have all my paperwork in separate files and separate binders, and I'm going to, have everything color coded in my closet. And let's be honest, that's hard to sustain for anybody. Sometimes we just got to make things practical. It won't always look the prettiest or be the most organized, but at least it's practical. If that means I just need a box for all of my important paperwork, that's what works, because it's easy for me to take my papers and put it in a box, but to go to a binder and find the right one and hole punch it and put it in there, that's too many steps for my brain, and it's already gotten distracted by step one. So let's find simple, practical ways. If you really struggle to hang your clothes, and the idea of putting it on a hanger and then putting it in the right spot, that feels exhausting. If it is more practical for you to use hooks, use that. If it's more practical to just put it in a drawer, use that. Yes, maybe the drawer might get a little messy. Maybe the hooks might get a little bit overloaded, but at least they're in a designated spot. They're not on the floor. They're not just in the laundry. They're in a spot where they're supposed to. And that's something that's important. I like to use the 60-second rule, which means if something is going to take me less than 60 seconds, do it now. The minute you tell your brain, oh, I'll do it later, you will not. You will forget it, and there's going to be little things all over. So for example, if it takes me 60 seconds to throw out something in the trash, let me throw it. Let me not just leave it on my desk. If it takes me 60 seconds to take my shoes and to put them in the closet, let me do that. If it takes me 60 seconds to put my jacket on the hanger, let me do that. The minute we step away from an item, our brain gets busy. One of the common ones that I can think of example is the coffee grinds after you grind your coffee. If you do not spend that 60 seconds to throw it out, the coffee grinds are hidden in the coffee machine. You can't physically see it. Your brain gets busy and you won't notice it until the next time you go to make a cup of coffee. Not always the most hygienic. So if it takes 60 seconds or less, teach your brain to do it right away. And lastly, sometimes we need a quick 10-minute tidy at the end of the day. This literally could be, I'm just going to put my timer on and I'm going to go quickly tidy up for 10 minutes. I don't have to do everything, but if I can do a couple of things here and there, it's going to help from things piling up and getting super messy. And it's not something that we have to do every day, but if we can train our body to do it at least 2 to 3 times a week, it can really help from those small clutters becoming big messes as well. Household chores is another area that can be really difficult to manage, especially when there's so many things going on at once. If something is hard for you, it's important for you to bring awareness on what it's hard and what are the barriers for that. I always say you can't make a change unless you're aware of it. So for example, if doing the laundry is hard, you're always forgetting it and you're not putting it in the dryer, it's important to write down, why is it hard? Is it that I can't hear the laundry machine when I go out? Is it that I hear it, but I don't think of it right away? Is it that I can't even get to the laundry? I always forget it until I completely run out of clothes. And sometimes it could even be small things or silly things like, for example, I didn't go to the grocery store because I couldn't find my grocery bags. I need my grocery bags and I ended up looking for them and I got distracted. Sometimes even small things like that can be a barrier. So when it comes to chores, again, my favorite How to ADHD has created this awesome issue log template, which is all about problem solving and realizing, if something was a barrier, what are the things that stopped me from doing it? Now, this is really important because it helps you know how you should be addressing things and what are the next steps. So if it's grocery shopping, you're forgetting your bags and you're always feeling like you're running late and you always feel like when you get to the grocery store, you get overwhelmed or you make impulsive decisions and you end up buying chocolate and chips, but not your important meals. Well, that's where we want to kind of adapt. Does that mean we have to buy our groceries online? That could be a really great way for you not to get extremely distracted by all the options and simply click the things that you need. Does that mean that we even need some additional help with meal cooking kits? There is no shame in using a meal cooking kit or buying groceries online. These are small things that can help support us. There's even businesses that will come help with organization or come help with the laundry. And yes, this is a bit of a financial investment, but for some individuals, these things are so hard to do. They end up taking so much time and causing so much stress that paying a $30 kind of fee ends up being way less than the amount of days that they will spend trying to get a task done. So what are your boundaries and what are some ways we can work around it? We have technology now, so let's use it. Let's talk about finances. This is definitely an important area to talk about because we know that this is something that is definitely a struggle, especially for individuals with ADHD. Typically, individuals with ADHD are more likely to have higher debt. Their salaries are also lower than their neurotypical peers, but also they struggle with something called ADHD tax. So things like late fee or debt increasing, all because we forgot to make a payment for something or we forgot to unsubscribe to a website. All of these things financially add up and can impact us. So we want to definitely look at managing our money. Number one, it's important that anything you can automate, do. Go through your online banking, anything that can automatically make a deposit, pay your credit card, pay your telephone bill, make that automatic. This is something that's super important because it is hard to remember, especially every month, all the different things we have to pay. So your insurance, your credit card, your phone bill, your electricity, your mortgage, try to make that all as automated as you can. Number two, use money tracking apps. A lot of times we don't realize how much we spend. We don't always check our Visa statements. And so money tracking apps are a really great way of helping manage that. Some of them might even give you notifications when you've gone over something. I do have a couple of recommendations for money spending apps at the very end of the slide. But for those of you with TD banking, My TD Spent is a really great one. It categorizes where you've kind of spent your money for the month and ones that are over your typical Some individuals even need to sign up for a credit card tracking app. Sorry, not credit card, but a credit tracking app, because we might not realize all the different things that impact our credit, like missing a payment or, you know, losing track that our credit card expired and all of a sudden everything is not paid as well. So credit tracking apps are sometimes really great because if there's ever a big hit on your credit, it also sends you a notification, and that way you can address it before months pass by, or sometimes even a year passes by and you didn't even realize it. If you are an individual who kind of does the free subscription for a month and then later forgets about it, set reminders immediately as you subscribe. Ask Alexa or Google. You don't even have to manually type it in. Just ask Alexa to put it in for you. And then lastly, create a savings account. A lot of times we want to impulsively spend, and that is not the best way to pay off our debt or to have extra money for when we need it if a car breaks down or if something happens. So it's important to have a savings account where you can transfer money in that I don't touch that unless it's an emergency, and then have your regular account where money can go in and out to pay things. For those of you who struggle with impulsive buying, especially with everything being online, sometimes it's important to decide on a budget before shopping. So when we get to the store, we usually get distracted by how pretty an item is and it's on sale, and ooh, I typically wouldn't spend $200 on this, but because it's on sale and it's such a good deal, I'm going to do it. So setting a budget ahead of time is something that you can do. I'm going out today, I'm only spending $50. That could be on food or clothes, but it's only $50. And this is actually something that's super important when it comes to holiday spending as well. That's when we're more likely to spend, so having a budget ahead of time. Sometimes it also helps to switch to cash because we don't realize how much we spent on a credit. So if your budget is $50, literally having $50 on hand, and when it's done, it's done. You can't go to your credit card. Sometimes even leaving your credit card at home. And then also setting some guidelines and rules for yourself. So I knew an individual who had a little card before they would buy anything. It gave them 3 questions. So are you only buying this because it's on sale? Is this something that you need right away? Is it over $10? So if it's under $10, no problem. Or is it over $50? So they had a certain amount that, if ever it was over, it was something that they had to pause about or think about. So set some rules for yourself to help kind of guide and make more control over your spending. Managing tasks, that's something that we need for everything. School, chores, work, you name it. And as I mentioned before, those kind of 3 important strategies, we'll really see it in managing tasks here. Number 1, break things down into smaller, doable pieces. The minute you see something big, it becomes overwhelming and your mind kind of just puts it on the side, especially if you're not interested. So break it down into small tasks. So whether that's I'm going on vacation and I need to wash my clothes and pack and make a list of where the places I'm going to go and book my hotel, that can seem like a lot all at once. So breaking it down into smaller things. What's the most important thing I need to do? All right, make a list of where I'm going, book my hotels, and take it step by step. Number 2, set deadlines for each piece. So don't just say I'm going to get it done whenever, but actually set personal deadlines. Even if they don't matter, set them for yourself. So for example, with a hotel, I need to book it by the end of this week. Why we set deadlines? Well, sometimes our brain doesn't really have a sense of time and it says, oh, I got tons of time to do it, or I don't need to do it today, I'll just do it later. And we keep pushing things until, wow, it's a day before your trip, you still haven't booked the hotel, and now you're running around to find your passport and you haven't packed, but you realize the clothes you want to pack are dirty and now it's overwhelming. So let's make things a little bit more manageable, set personal deadlines and break them in. And especially when it comes to work or academics, try to reduce distractibility. We know if the TV is on, we're not focusing. We know sometimes even with computers, we want to log into all these websites. So maybe we need to set a website blocker. Do whatever it is that you need to help with distractibility. On our phones, if you have a Samsung, there's a focus mode where you can turn off apps and decide which ones are going to send you notifications and which ones won't. Do whatever you need to do to reduce that distractibility. And set a timer. Set a timer for task because it helps us realize and kind of give us motivation to get things done. All right, I just got to work for 20 minutes and then I can take a 5-minute break. But this also helps with hyperfocus, where if you get super focused, you forget to eat or drink or stretch your legs. This kind of gives you a nice reminder of that. Some individuals benefits from earplugs, so if you get distracted by noise, go ahead and try that, or headphones. And make it fun, make it engaging. Use colors if you can. Use anything to kind of help make this a little bit more interesting for you. Some individuals benefit from a body double, which means having just another physical person in the room working on something can help motivate you to get things done as well. So both of you studying or writing a paper or sending emails can help. And plan rewards. Again, we gotta teach our brain that we do work for a little bit, but there are some things we can still do to enjoy. And rewards don't have to be anything crazy, something as small as 5 minutes, but I'm gonna do a Sudoku puzzle. I'm gonna go watch this YouTube video, whatever it is. But make sure you also set timers for your rewards, because your brain's gonna wanna stick to that reward and forget to go back to the task at hand. So when it comes to completing tasks, it's important to realize there are 4 factors that help with our motivations. Number 1, if something is interesting and rewarding. So think of, a little kid who's really into Minecraft or Lego. Like, that's super interesting. They'll spend hours on that. That's super motivating. What is it for you? Is it things to do with technology? Is it things to do with hands-on and building something? Everyone's different. But that's the first one that keeps us motivated. The second one is if something is new. Ooh, something brand new. I've never done it before. Wow, this looks kind of cool. I want to figure out more about it. Your brain automatically gets more motivated and engaged. Number 3, if something is challenging, and it's good kind of challenging, it's making you think, you really want to keep trying, sticking. Think of those video games where you keep wanting to pass that level. That's something that's, interesting and challenging. So it hits both of those motivation points. And the last one is something that's urgent. Oh, remember that deadline that was at midnight and you ended up sending the paper at 11:59? Well, yeah, that's urgent. That's what gets you motivated. These are 4 things that really help push our brain. And sometimes we don't always have the motivation, so we have to trick our brain. So maybe we have to give ourselves a reward, as we mentioned, at the end of something. Maybe, oh, I don't really like this, but I got these really cool pens and I love colors, so I'm going to make it interesting for me. Maybe I'm going to give myself a challenge. I hate cleaning, but if I can get it done in 5 minutes, let's try and beat my own time at it. These are things that can help us to stay a little bit more motivated. I heard this really great story of this adult with ADHD, and he really didn't like cleaning. Really had a hard time, would always kind of leave a mess around. And what ended up working for him was he made it into a game where he would pretend that he was a spy, and whatever room he came into, he had to leave it exactly how it was so no one can detect that he was there. And that was what kept him interested and motivated, and make sure that he would check and clean up after himself, just so that his spy skills or spy games were still intact. So that's something that you can even think about doing. Time management is extremely hard for individuals with ADHD. They often have a different perspective of time. They might not realize that they've been sitting playing a video game for 3 hours. They might not realize that they've been, staring blankly at the computer and it's been a solid 30, 40 minutes and they haven't touched their paper. They might not realize that something actually takes 2 hours, but they think they can get it done in 5 minutes. And sometimes that can cause frustration, and that can cause some situations that are stressful. So we want to work our way around this as best as we can. Number 1, do as much as you can ahead of time. Remember when we talked about that 60-second rule? If I can get it done in 60 seconds, let me get it done. Same goes with time management. Anything that you can get done beforehand, do it. So that includes packing your lunch. If you can do that the night before, do it, because the minute you leave it for the morning, it's not going to get done. It's going to feel rushed, and it's going to be things that delay you even more. If that means laying out your clothes ahead of time, packing your papers that you need for work or your textbooks or whatever it is that you need, have that ready ahead of time. Do not leave it for the last minute. Use your 60-second rule, but also at the end of the night, think, is there anything I need to do to help the morning go smoother? Number 2, set a timer. Your timer is going to be your best friend. I know we say this a lot, but timers are super important because they help give you track of time. So if you need to be out of the house by 9 o'clock, set a timer for 8:50. That kind of gives you a heads up you need to go, and then another timer for 9 o'clock as well. Timers also help because they help you kind of estimate your time and get a better understanding of how it goes. So, oh, I think it's only going to take me 5 minutes to mow lawn, and I can do the laundry at the same time, and then I should be out by my appointment at 9 o'clock. Well, when you set your timer and you realize the alarm's gone off and it's 8:50, but you still haven't done the laundry and you're in the middle of cutting the grass, that kind of gives you a bit of a heads up that maybe your estimation time wasn't the best. And wear a watch. Watches are super important because they help you keep track of time. The minute it's not visual for us, we forget about it. So the minute we don't have a watch next to us, we don't realize, hey, it's been 30 minutes. The minute we don't put a timer on, we don't realize, oh, it's actually 9 o'clock. We need to get out the door. So always using visuals to kind of help stimulate and guide us as we're going through it. And this is something that takes time and it takes practice as well. As we talked about before in our pillars to ADHD treatment, lifestyle is an important foundation, and you got to make sure that you are in check and that you're also keeping a healthy amount of sleep, exercise, and food when it comes to managing symptoms. So when it comes to sleep, there's something called sleep hygiene, which means taking the right steps to at least try to improve the quality of where you're sleeping and the amount of sleep that you're getting. These are simple things, but they make a huge difference. So a consistent time, making sure you're sleeping at a consistent time and waking up. You're training your brain that this is the time for sleep, this is the time for waking up, versus if every day is different, your brain is completely out of whack and it has no idea what's going on. Number 2, having a separate environment for your sleep versus your work. I know, especially with COVID-19, we loved staying in our PJs and just working from bed at home. This is awful for your brain because number 1, you're not going to be as productive. Your brain associates bed with sleep and comfort. It's not as productive. But number 2, when you start actually getting work done on your bed, now your brain associates bed with being awake. So the minute you try to go to bed, it's really hard, right? This is kind of another same reason why we say change out of your pajamas. Make sure, you're wearing something that makes it feel like you're still going to work, because our brain, as silly as it is really affected by where we're at and what we wear. Reduce your screen time as well. At least 30 minutes to an hour before bedtime, we should really be reducing that screen time. It should be off. Screens are designed to keep us awake, to keep us engaged. 5 minutes of Instagram or TikToks ends up being 2 hours. So we need to definitely minimize that. There's some phones that automatically, when 10 o'clock comes, they go on like a sleep mode or a black and white mode, and it kind of gives you a heads up that, ooh, we shouldn't be touching our phone. Reducing caffeine, again, sounds simple, but super important. If you know that your body is highly impacted by caffeine, and we know that keeps us up, making sure that after a certain amount of time, we're not drinking. So maybe for you, 1 o'clock, anything past 1, it's going to keep you up. And lastly, making sure you have a dark space. So somewhere that's dark, there's curtains, it's kind of getting your body again ready for that sleep as well. If you're struggling with sleep, there's a great documentary on Netflix made by Headspace all about sleep, and it gives you some tips and tricks as well. And there's some websites as well where Headspace talks about, really good sleep hygiene. So I really recommend that you look at that. In addition to sleep, making sure that you're exercising and you're physically working out. We know that when we exercise, it actually does help us with our focus as well. So finding a consistent time. And sometimes even setting up your workout clothes or having a YouTube video set up the night before, so the minute you wake up, it's kind of already up and ready to go. I even know individuals who sleep with their workout clothes. And again, nothing wrong with that. Whatever works for you to help you going. Sometimes even individuals who are working from home set timers for them to stretch. They get a bike desk or a standing desk, and even just having an accountability partner. So when we talked about that body double for studying, the same goes with exercise. So have someone that you can work out with can help keep you consistent and motivated to go. And finally, let's talk about keeping your brain stimulated. Individuals with ADHD often are looking for different things to keep them stimulated and to get a rush of dopamine. And sometimes they're not always the healthiest. So your brain gets easily bored, and then you end up spending 3-4 hours on TikTok or binge watching Netflix. And again, not always the healthiest for us. It's kind of similar to if you went to a grocery store when you were hungry. You're not making the best decision. You're probably getting a bunch of food that you don't really need and then a bunch of junk as well. Then you end up feeling like garbage after. That's the same when our brain gets bored and we try to immediately find something to stimulate it. We don't always make the best decisions. So we want to separate those. Just like we want to go to the grocery store when we're not hungry, we want to plan ahead of time activities that we can do to help keep our brain stimulated that are healthy. So think of it as you're designing your own dopamine menu, things that keep you engaged and stimulated that can help you for when you're bored. Think of when you're designing your menu, what have you done in the past that made you super excited, made you feel good after? So is it when you went and go walk your dog, when you talked to a friend, when you cooked a meal from scratch, when you went to the gym? Think of things that have kind of helped you feel good and write those down. And then also think about what are some things that you do in the past when you're bored that don't make you feel so good. So is it binge watching Netflix for hours? Is it going on your phone? Is it just texting a bunch of people and then kind of regretting after the things that you're messaging them or feeling that you look a little bit silly? Now, every kind of activity that you have on your list of things that made you feel good, you'll realize that they take up different times. So there's some things where you might call them an appetizer. So they're kind of quick, easy things that you can do. So things like I went for a stretch, I got a cup of coffee, I played music in the background. These are quick little easy things that we can do to help kind of keep us engaged and stimulated. And then you might have your main meals. So these are things that kind of take a little bit longer, but they make us feel really full. So maybe games night with a friend, going for a walk with a dog, going and for a bike ride, right? And it's important to set up these activities ahead of time. So there's nothing wrong with if you really enjoy Netflix and you want to go watch, but set that time ahead of it. So you end up doing it where you don't feel guilty about it. So I really want to watch this show. I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock once I'm done this, and this. And that's a different way that you can help create a menu that stimulates you without feeling so guilty at the very end about all the things that you should have been doing or could have been doing. All right, so this last little bit are some resources of things that I've talked earlier. So in here I have some recommendations for books, websites, application. I'm going to go through the sites pretty quickly, and you can kind of have a look at these more in depth on your own time if there's something particular that I pointed out that you think might really work for you. So number one, there are definitely some support groups out there, and of course I always think of Can-Learn Society. We have an adult ADHD group called More Than Making List, and I know some of you have already kind of are on the wait list for this, but I do recommend that if you're not on the wait list, that you go ahead and give a shout out to our program coordinator. I have her email at the very end of this PowerPoint. More Than List is specifically focused on tips, tricks, a little bit like this PowerPoint, but more details about managing your ADHD. The great thing about it is if you cannot afford it, there is also a financial assistance that you can apply for. There is a bit of a wait list, so you do have to be patient, but this is definitely something that can help guide you in the right way to go. We also have ADHD coaching. Regardless of what age you are, you work one-on-one with a trained facilitator on managing some different symptoms or areas of your life that you think you need a little bit more help in as well. And as I mentioned before, we have these free support groups for our webinars. So the one that we're doing for ADHD, adult ADHD, will hopefully be in the beginning of August. So I do recommend that you have a look at our website for that, if that's something that you would like to get more information on. Next, we have a list of apps that you can download depending on the area that you're looking at. So for financing, spending tracker, TD My Spend are great ones for managing money, but we also have Mint as well. Organization, Evernote, Dropbox, QuickBook if you are self-employed or if you have to keep track of receipts or anything like that is really, really great. Productivity as well. We have different ones with timers to help with note taking. Notion is a great one that a friend of mine just introduced me to, where it helps with managing tasks, breaking them down, setting deadlines. You can even invite other individuals, so it's even great for work. We have a couple for sleep as well, so somewhere you can just listen to calming music or meditations. And also there is some time management one. So the Pomodoro technique is a great technique where you work for 25 minutes and you get a break for 5. So sometimes even downloading an app for that as well can help. There are also some different technologies to help with studying, with focusing. So University of Calgary has some really great technology recommendations for things like even speech to text or text to speech. So if you need a little bit of accommodations for that, how you can reach out to that. There's some for organizing your time if you're a student, for creating your own quizzes. Grammarly is a great one with writing. So again, let's think smart, different ways to help us out. Grammarly is something you can download on your Word document. It works for Mac and Windows, as well as you can even have it online on Chrome, and it finds errors that spell check might not usually. And there's also website blockers for if you need to study for a certain period of time, but you always find yourself on the internet doing something else, you can also download those. Here you'll find a couple of websites to learn more about ADHD. There is so much information out there, but these are definitely some great websites to recommend. CanLearn has so much resources on their website. I would definitely dive right in and see. They talk about adults, they talk about children, they have recommendations for apps and technology, so definitely have a look at that. But there's also some other great ADHD resources out there as well. When it comes to that psychoeducation, as we mentioned before, there are some great books for recommendation. Whether you are an individual with ADHD or someone that you love, it's always important to learn more. And once you learn, it really helps you understand to make those changes, build that awareness. So a couple recommendations for you to have a look at, depending on what your needs are. And finally, some individuals with ADHD might benefit from counseling, and it's a great way to have someone keep you accountable, to help someone kind of guide those strategies that we talked about to put them more in focus. So if this is something that you're interested in, there's a number of different websites and resources to look into counseling. Some are free, some are offered on a sliding scale depending on your family income. Definitely something to look into. And to see if you can find someone specifically that can help manage your ADHD. It has been so great talking to you about such an important topic. And I'm sure as we're talking about this, maybe you have some questions that have popped up into your head. This is definitely a topic we can go on and on about for a very long time. So if you had any specific questions or you wanted to know more information about those groups that I've mentioned before, I've put my email at the very end of the slide, as well as my program coordinator's email, Jamie. Do not hesitate to send us an email. Let us know your thoughts, your questions. Or if there's anything specific you wanted to know more about, we would love to hear from you. So thank you for spending today with me and learning a little bit more about a really important topic. You take care.